I love that podcasts allow us to listen to stories we wouldn't otherwise hear, to build empathy, to gain knowledge, since there's so many different types of podcasts, you can be entertained, you can laugh, you can cry, you can learn how to build a business. With a podcast, it's a lot of hobbyists. This is a side hustle. This is something that people are doing on the side of their full-time job. So you have to practice a lot more patience. And when a host brings on a guest, that trust is extended to the guest. And so a listener is going to say, well, if Brett had him on the show, then they must know what they're talking about, because Brett's not going to bring on someone who doesn't know what they're talking about. And I want to also remind people that, size is not what you should be looking at. You need to look at the value of who's listening, because
And welcome to a new episode of Digital Coffee Marketing Brew. And I'm your host, Brett Dicey. If you could please subscribe to this podcast on all your favorite podcasting apps. Leave a 5-star review. It really does help with the rankings. And let me know how I am doing. But this week, we're going to be talking about, traditional PR versus podcasting PR. I know it's a very interesting little play on things, but I think it's going to be a very interesting episode because PR is PR. We always need to learn new things. But with me, I have Michelle with me, and she is the podcast matchmaker, a podcast publicist and host of the award-winning podcast, My Simplified Life. She works with entrepreneurs, authors, and experts hone in on their story abilities, grow their business, and elevate themselves as a thought leader. Her first book, How to Get on Podcast, debuts it did debut in January 2024. And Michelle is a wife, mom of two, stepmom of two, and a fur mom as well. But welcome to the show, Michelle.
thank you so much for having me, Brett. I'm excited to be here.
Yes, and the first question is, all my guests is, are you a coffee or tea drinker?
Coffee. Tea maybe in the afternoon in the winter, but otherwise it is coffee, coffee, coffee.
Do you have any specifics on what coffee do you like, or is it just kind of give me whatever is hot or cold?
I prefer flavored coffee. So right now, since we're in fall and pumpkin spice is out, it's ground coffee, but it is flavored. Otherwise, usually it's hazelnut for the non-fall, but I will buy it at Target in bulk to the point where I can drink my pumpkin flavored coffee until May.
That's fair. And I gave a brief summary of your expertise. Can your listeners a little bit more about what you do?
Yes. So my clients all get on podcasts to be interviewed around their expertise. And, I've seen a lot of agency owners who say, this is the best way to sell, to promote your book. But I prefer to have my clients go on to share their story and their knowledge. We know that at the end of every podcast, the host is going to say, where can people find you? Where can they buy their book? All of that good stuff. So the whole purpose of an interview is to share your knowledge, to share, if you have a book, what's in the book, to share your story of how you got started in your business. Why do you do what you do? And to really tackle it from that angle, and to give people something that they didn't know about before, something that resonates with them. I love that podcasts allow us to listen to stories we wouldn't otherwise hear, to build empathy, to gain knowledge, since there's so many different types of podcasts, you can be entertained, you can laugh, you can cry, you can learn how to build a business, you can do anything by listening to a podcast. And so my job is to define what those topics are for my clients, and then to create media kits, pitch them to podcasts that align with their message, their target audience, and then help them repurpose that content into marketing content so that it is not finished when the recording stops. They can utilize their shows, their interviews in all kinds of ways, with quotes, with graphics, and promoting it across a lot of platforms instead of simply just the podcast, as a podcast host does as well.
So how does the reach for podcast PR compare to traditional PR? Because traditional PR, you have to go to the journalist, you have to pitch your story, you have to hope that the journalist will actually open the email, you have to hope that they actually read the email. There's a lot of hoping and doing a lot of research. I mean, you have to do a lot of research for the podcast as well, but a lot more research because you have to make sure that they are still at the place that you are pitching it to. And if they're not, then you kind of have to go, where did I go wrong? So, like, what is the difference between reaches?
There's a lot of similarity in that you have to do your research. You have to make sure the show is still being produced and is active, just as the journalist there. But one of the big differences is that news has a cycle where you're trying to garner that attention quickly because there's always breaking news. There's something else that's happening in the media. So how is it that you fit in, and do you fit in within that timeline? And if we're not talking about breaking news, maybe you're looking at, I need to get on that holiday list that they have coming out. Well, you need to be looking at that like 6 months in advance. With a podcast, it's a lot of hobbyists. This is a side hustle. This is something that people are doing on the side of their full time job. So you have to practice a lot more patience. Nobody is sitting here pining away waiting for that pitch because there's just no one who wants to be a guest on my show. Everybody wants to be a guest. And so you have to practice that patience. And that's why it's so important to personalize the pitch, to create these speaking topics that align with what the host is trying to put out there, and then not following up within 24 hours. When you're looking at a journalist or a reporter, you're following up quickly because you need to get that story out there. When it's a podcast, you shouldn't be following up for maybe 2 to 3 weeks, if that, because there's the full-time job. Like I said, they're doing something where they're not sitting here going, oh, what else can I get? I need that email. I need that pitch. Whereas a journalist is, they are constantly getting news stories. What is it going to be? Another difference is in the pitch itself. A pitch to a journalist is going to be concise. You have to get right to the point. This is what we're talking about. This is it. Whereas a podcast pitch is longer. Here are why we relate to you and your show, and we've listened to it. And here's a 2 or 3 sentence bio on the client. And then here are the speaking topics. And here's where our client's been featured. So it's a lot more. Here's everything that there is so that the host does not have to leave the email unless they're choosing to click on a hyperlink of the name to go to the website or the podcast that they were most recently interviewed on, versus something that's very short and concise and gets right to the point. So those are two of the big differences, along with, if you're going on TV and you're being interviewed for a couple minutes, that's it. It's a couple minutes. A podcast is anywhere from 20 to 60 minutes. So it's much longer form of content. And then that'll also allows you to pull more content from it to repurpose it, versus if you only got 2 minutes of airtime, that was it. Did you have one good quote in those 2 minutes versus having 60 minutes of a whole lot of talking in which things can be pulled from? So those are the big differences between traditional PR and podcast PR.
Mm. And I do like to mention that there is something called pod fade, which basically is people do release their podcast episodes, but then eventually don't release their podcast episodes and eventually does die. So there is a vast amount of that going on in the podcasting industry specifically. Plus, most don't actually go beyond their third episode. Most do. So yeah. So if you're on episode 4, you beat out the majority of other podcasts.
It's so sad, and yet that is, the statistic of what it is. And some will be on forever. I'm on episode, I just released 245 this week. So it's crazy, but you have to look and see, are they still active, and when was the most active episode? Was it a month ago? And if it was a month ago, was that month because they only release one per month? How consistent are they? So those are definitely things that need to be looked at.
And I mean, what are the unique advantages of podcast PR offer building a personal connection with the audiences? Is it just basically like being the audience being aware of you now, or is it more than that?
More than that, because they get to hear your voice. You were literally in their ear. You get to share your story, you get to share your knowledge, and there's also the trust factor. People are listening to podcasts that they trust. They show up every week listening to that host, that episode, because they enjoy it. They want to hear more of what that host is putting out there. And when a host brings on a guest, that trust is extended to the guest. And so a listener is going to say, well, if Brett had him on the show, then they must know what they're talking about, because Brett's not going to bring on someone who doesn't know what they're talking about. So that trust is automatically given to you, instead of a cold call where you're sending an email out saying, hey, do you want to work with me? And you know nothing about me and they're just words on a screen. Somebody's listening now to you telling what you know, telling the story of why you started your business. You get to really be yourself and they get to know you by listening to this conversation. And so that's a really big deal. That's a gift in my opinion. And that's why being a podcast guest is so worthwhile, because you remove these barriers and you also have that trust extended to you from the get-go.
And speaking of costs, since everybody is very worried about how everything costs these days, what is the cost between a podcast PR campaign and a traditional PR campaign?
A podcast campaign is going to be less expensive than traditional, and the results are going to be better with a podcast uh, tour per se, because we can't guarantee anything. Anyone who says either traditional or podcast, I guarantee this, don't do it, because nobody can guarantee. I can't guarantee that, well, I've been on Brett's show, so I know he's going to take my pitch for this next guest. I can't guarantee that because I'm not the host of this show. So don't look for a guarantee, because that's not okay. Um, when we look at podcasts, what I say is I will guarantee you a certain amount of interviews. And so that means that we're going to work as hard as we can and as hard as possible to secure those interviews. We don't we don't guarantee audience sizes, but we will give you all of the stats behind a show that we have access to. And I want to also remind people that, size is not what you should be looking at. You need to look at the value of who's listening. Because if you come on to a show where your job is all about marketing and we're talking about marketing, and maybe there's 500 listeners, that's perfect, because we want to talk to the marketers. Versus if you just went on a show that was aimed at auto mechanics and there were a million mechanics that were listening that don't care about marketing, then what is the point? You'd rather get to targeted 500 listeners versus a million who just aren't interested. So those are things to all, pay attention to as well. And a podcast, you get that targeted audience, versus traditional media. You might have somewhat of a target depending on, are you going to a certain magazine that focuses on your audience? Maybe, or are you on a TV show that you don't know who's watching? And it could be a lot of different people that the target audience is not there. So be prepared also to invest, anywhere from podcasts. There are agencies that might charge 500 to 5,000 a month. A PR company for traditional PR is going to be multiple thousands, 5, 10, 15, up to 100,000 a month. So they're big differences. I wish I was charging 100,000 a month. I wouldn't have to work so hard.
We all wish we were charging 100,000 a month. But I mean, it is true that it's significantly less money to actually do podcasts because, well, it's not as built up. Plus, you also do get that niche because, and I think what PR people and marketers traditionally think is that the bigger the number, the more awareness they get. But then it's not the right awareness because, yeah, just because your industry, like for example, marketing is not as popular as say like gaming is. Like gaming in general is going to have a bigger audience because you have young and old gamers. With marketing, you have a very specific, smaller, specific group because there's only a certain amount of marketers because there's only a certain amount of businesses. And so I think for me, a lot of PR marketers get it wrong saying that we should have this big audience and be like, no, you have the right audience. So in what ways do podcast PR help establish thought leadership more effective way than traditional PR?
More time to really share your knowledge, to share what you've learned, what you do, how you do it, why you do it, than, if you were going on a 2-minute TV interview where you don't get to share all of this. You get a big stage, but is it really going to promote what you know, who you are, and all of that? And this is also where you get to reach other people. You don't know who's listening. You have no idea who could be listening to this podcast right now. And it could be the one person who goes, "Oh, yes, I not only want to work with you, maybe you need to write a book. Maybe you need to do a TED Talk. Maybe you need to have your own show." There could be somebody listening who is going to help elevate you to that next level. And the more people you reach out to and they get to hear all of your knowledge, then that promotes you as the thought leader. This is putting yourself out there. And that's why it's so important to share these interviews, to repurpose them so that people can see and hear from you in all of these different ways of, yeah, you know what, Michelle knows what she's talking about because she keeps appearing on these podcasts and she's talking about podcast interviews. And so that then it presents you, it elevates you as the thought leader, as the expert in whatever industry niche that you are in, because you keep showing up, you keep talking about it, and people hear that repetition in a good way, not in a, oh boy, she's talking about it again, here we go. But yeah, she's been invited on this show because she knows what she's talking about, because she is talking about podcast interviews.
And then just moving on to content wise, because I mean, traditional PR does have its place, but I feel like with podcast PR, you can have a blog post about your episode. You can have the audio, the video, the shorts, the audiograms. Like it seems like there's a longer tail of content that you could repurpose through PR, podcast PR than actual traditional PR.
Absolutely. You know, if you're getting on TV and you've got that 2-minute clip, then there you go. There's your 2-minute clip and you got probably one quote. Whereas if you're on a podcast, you do have some cases video. You always have the audio. That's going to live forever on all of the podcast platforms. There are show notes that you can put into a blog post. There are, you know, tweets that you can do on X. You can put a thread on. You can do it on Instagram. You can do a story. You can do a reel. You can do a post. You know, right there, there's 3 different pieces of content. Then you can use Facebook, use Pinterest. There's so many different ways. I also create a Spotify playlist for all of my clients to put all of your shows, your interviews in one spot. That one playlist can then be embedded on your website, on your press page. It can be put onto your LinkedIn under your media for your current job. There's so many different ways that you can repurpose content. You know, we pull a transcript for every client interview and then we highlight the quotes of, "This was a really good thing you said. You should make it into a quote graphic." You know, to stop quoting famous people or celebrities, quote yourself. So that way people see that you are the thought leader and you're also thanking the host because you're promoting their podcast by mentioning them and giving them a plug as well. So it's a double whammy of promoting yourself in a non-sleazy way while also thanking your host for having you and hopefully bringing them more listeners as well.
And what metrics should we be using? Now, I do know as a podcaster myself, podcasting metrics aren't the best. I do think they need to change. I think downloads is a very simplistic way of gauging the how invested the audience is. I do think time spent is probably a better metric, but we're still here, so I'll let the metric people try to figure that out. But I mean, what metrics should they be using?
We look across the board at, you know, how many reviews do they have on Apple? Do they have some on Spotify? We also then look at, I have Podchaser, so I can see the approximate downloads, listens. But unless you pay for that, you don't get to see that. You can look at listen notes, which I, I love and hate listen notes because I think that, you know, I'm in the top 2%. Well, it's not that hard to get in the top 2% because as long as you're consistent, you're showing up and you're doing an episode, then you basically get in that top 5% of podcasts because like you said, most aren't making it past the third episode. The other thing we look at is social media. You know, do they have a following on Instagram? And if they have 10,000 followers, let's look at a post because out of 10,000 followers, only 3 people are liking their post. So maybe they bought those followers. You know, now you can buy reviews. I get Apple podcast promoters in my LinkedIn stuff all day long. So everything can be bought now, which is unfortunate. And that's why we look at all of the different platforms to see, is it consistent? If a show has 1,000 reviews, well, how many followers do they have on Instagram? And does that correlate to each other? So we look at everything to kind of get a bigger picture of, is this legit? Isn't it? And then simply reading the description. I think people forget to just read the description of the show to see who is the target audience and look at that. Don't get so hung up on numbers. This would also come into play if someone asks you to pay to be a guest on their show, because I have found that those who want money, and I do not pay to be a podcast guest, do not pay for traditional PR placement. That's advertising either way. And if a podcast host says, well, I've got 1 million downloads and I do this, do that, go to their YouTube. Do they actually have subscribers there? And it will tell you how many views they get. These are public things that you can look at. So it takes some extra work, some due diligence, but there are certain numbers that you can look at and identify and get a good feel for. Is this truly accurate or not?
Yeah, the bane of my existence is podcast promoters. I swear I get like 5 of them a day, and it's very, very annoying. I never respond to them. I never follow them, and I never will because I do not want that headache.
Yeah, it's them. And do you want to grow your Instagram by 10,000 followers?
Yeah, like all of that, I'm like, stop it. Or on YouTube or Rumble, it's the same thing. Do you want to grow this? I see you get less things. I'm like, yeah, I'm growing my channel, dude. Like, it doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah, organic growth is much better than purchasing followers.
Yeah, so yeah, look at the podcaster. Usually most podcasters will never make you pay or any of that. I don't do it. And we usually never use like the spam stuff because we all know that it hurts in the long run.
Yeah, and if they do want you to pay and you're willing to pay despite being advised not to pay, pay attention also. Are they letting their audience know that this guest has paid to be on their show? Because there are rules and regulations per the government that they have to let the audience know that this is a paid guest. Just like with advertising on TV, because it is advertising. So we need, it's the wild wild west is podcasts, where it's great that we have so much flexibility, but at the same time some people are abusing it, and at some point there will be crackdowns for that type of a thing. So if you're paying, pay attention to what is the host saying and are they disclosing it.
Unfortunately, it's always a smaller group that ruins it for everybody else. But I'm speaking about how does the targeting capability of PR podcasts compare to traditional PR methods?
You can get much deeper in who you're targeting. I work with a lot of authors. So we look at, what is your book about? Who is going to read your book? Now, what types of podcasts are they listening to? Are the beach reads all a bunch of moms that are listening? Then let's target the mom podcasts. You can get much deeper, much more specific when it comes to podcasts versus traditional PR. There are going to be places and blogs and magazines and digital outlets that you can target a more specific audience, but podcasts can truly dig down. The call I was on just before this, we were talking about a romantasy podcast where they literally only talk to romance authors. So you get very targeted. Those are the people who are listening. They want to hear those authors because those are the books they're reading. You can't do that really on TV. So it becomes much more specific. And that's a great thing because you get to reach the audience that you want to.
And what do you think? What types of businesses or individuals benefit from podcast PR? Because I always say not everybody should start a podcast, but everybody should be a guest.
I agree, because there's a lot of reasons why not everybody should start one. One of them is you have to be consistent. You have to show up. With being a podcast guest, you do need to show up by all means. You need to, be professional. You need to have your setup for your audio and your video. But I agree that everybody can benefit from being a podcast guest because we all have a story to share. We all have some sort of a pivot that's brought us to where we are. We all have a reason why we do what we do. Why do you wake up in the morning excited to do your job? Why did you write the book that you wrote? What parts of you are in that book? What is it about your team that they show up every day for work? What type of clients are you working with? What type of knowledge do you have? Do you have tips that you can share with somebody about what you do for work that you can then help someone else do it too? You're not going to put yourself out of a job. You're simply sharing that knowledge. And somebody who listens to a podcast where you're sharing what you do and how you do it, they're going to go, "Oh, that was great that Michelle shared how to pitch a podcast. And she did that for free. So imagine then what's going to happen when you work with me and you pay me to do this for you, how worthwhile that will be." It's a way to allow people to get to know you. And yet it's also a comfortable, relaxed setting because it's just a conversation between two people that everyone gets to eavesdrop on. So for people who are, more introverted and don't want to take the stage, this is a great way to simply have a one-on-one conversation with another human being, be yourself, show up, and yet you're going to also reach hundreds, thousands, potentially millions of people by doing podcast interviews.
And if you have a good podcast host, it won't even feel like it's like an interview because it will really be a good conversation. So always find a good podcast host because they will guide you as opposed to they're learning podcast hosts. I'll just say that they're learning how to do it. Like just find that one that will help you guide through because we are really guides to this interview style.
Exactly. Yes. And, I think a good host is going to be able to read the body language, to hear the voice of, oh, this person's nervous. So let me talk about this instead. Or maybe, there's another question that I can ask. And that's why it's so important for both parts to do their homework, to do their research on who they're interviewing, and for the guests to do their research on who they're being interviewed by. So that way you get a more comfortable feeling when you show up versus, meeting someone in the coffee line and saying, "Hey, nice shirt." That's it. You don't know the person. But if you do some stalking ahead of time, then at least you know that you can have a question or two in your back pocket.
I always appreciate someone saying nice shirt, but I mean, if you see me, more power to you. If you tell it to me, I'll be like, oh, thank you. Anyways, uh, in what ways can the podcast PR be integrated with a comprehensive strategy with traditional? Because I feel like these can to be very there can be a lot of symmetry between them because of the different natures of them.
Can be, and I think that both is a great strategy. It's just that you need to make sure that whoever's pitching you understands the differences, because it can't be the same type of pitch, the same format for both of them. So it does take more work and effort on the part of the publicist. I've worked with PR companies, agencies, where they've brought me in to do the podcast part because it is so different. And that's very helpful for the client to get two experts who know what to do and how to do it, and team up, but at the same time go our separate ways and get the job done. So definitely integrate both. We would have weekly team meetings of, okay, where are you, and did this angle work? There's this breaking news that might be applicable to you. But again, podcasting is much more long term. So we're not going to we might get a yes on a pitch, and then the calendar link isn't open for 2 more months, and then you record and it's another month before it comes out. So breaking news is not really the way to go for podcasts, unless you are getting on one of those breaking news podcasts where they are doing something every single day. So it's a much longer game. The same can be said for traditional PR. You might not get a placement for 6 months to a year, but at least with a podcast, you're getting a yes, you're getting a calendar link much sooner. It's just that nobody can guarantee when this is all going to happen.
It's true. I mean, a lot of times it's months ahead for what I'm actually doing because I mean, you get a lot of guests, you pre-record all this stuff. So, and plus mine's not timely at all. I mean, we talk about marketing and PR and yes, there's some new trends, but they're not traditional marketing and traditional PR is always going to be the same. There's nothing different about it.
Yeah. And some like to, I love to batch record. I love to be able to get ahead, especially if the summer months are coming, or, the holidays are around the corner. Right now, I'm into the middle of October and we're recording this in the beginning of September. So, if you have something that needs to come out October 1st, for my show, you're too late because it's already done. So you have to plan ahead.
And you could also ask the host if they can move it up too, because a lot of them will be like, okay, that's fine. I can rearrange things, but don't expect. And I've had some guests be like, oh, so when is it coming up? And be like, I told you it's been several months. Let the process work out. I will let you know when it gets released. Don't badger me because then you're going to make me mad.
Right, and then it'll never come out. Imagine that. Because there's that too. It could be that and that's on both ends, traditional and podcasts, that something happens and maybe a show stops airing and there goes that interview. It could be that breaking news happened and there went your interview over there. So, yeah, it can happen.
And I mean, can you use the role of AI within podcast PR? I mean, we're going to have to talk about it because everybody's using AI. I will admit that I do use AI to help me automate a lot of this stuff. Can you use that for research and maybe either our first draft pitch or to help you clarify pitches? Does that work?
I've tested it. I've told AI to pitch myself to my own show. And I was surprised at what it regurgitated because it said that I had been interviewed places that I've never been interviewed. Um, so you and AI, it tells you, fact check it. So there are some errors. I would say don't use it because you need to personalize it. You need to listen. Um, the times when I do use it might be if I need a bio changed for a client because they've given it to me in first person and I want it changed to third person. If I have topic ideas that I'm not feeling as creative with my words, then to throw in what I already have created and ask it to, make it sound more professional or be more creative or do something to that extent, then I will use it. But I rarely copy and paste it word for word. I change it even then some more. So for me, it's more of a brainstorming. What do I have? I love to use it as a process. I do use it for my show, like for show notes, because there's already a format. Just pull, things together, that type of a thing. But again, the content's already created. It's just, formatting it in a nicer way. So that's when I would use it, but not to write a pitch. I know there are agencies who are using it for pitch writing, and I cringe because I've tested it and I don't like it.
Eventually, but right now, yes, check all your stuff, reread it over, change it minorly if you do. I do think they are getting better, but I don't think they're there yet.
Yeah, I still think there's a ways to go.
And what are some of the challenges that podcast PR may face that traditional PR doesn't face at all?
Oh, that's a good question. With podcasts, it's changing. It's always because even though it's been around for over 2 decades, it's still new. It's still, people question, oh, well, is it going away? Is it growing? And, with the pandemic, we saw podcasts grow immensely of new shows coming on. But then you also saw shows fall off because we were all stuck at home and people who had a studio didn't know how to record at home. And then you saw people who have kids who went, oh, now I can't record because there's too much noise. We've got homeschooling and all of that. So, not knowing what the future is going to hold, you don't know. I think it's going to continue to grow. I think that we see, Spotify, we see iHeart, we see more deals continue to be done with celebrity hosts. We see more true crime popping up. It's growing. I don't think it's going anywhere. So in that sense, I think that a podcast publicist is in a great spot. We do see more of the automation, the AI, more of these websites where you can just sign up and be a guest, and that's it. But are those shows going to stick around too? So I think it's important to continue that personalized touch for a podcast publicist to make sure that that doesn't go away and for those to be replaced per se.
It is true. Unfortunately, a lot of times it changes a little too quickly where Google just decides to take away things and move things around. And from Google, if people don't know, from Google Podcast to YouTube Music, that's been like the biggest headache is Google decides to make something and then do away with it. Then you have to pivot because it's Google.
Right. So don't put all your eggs in one basket.
This is true. But yeah, it is changing. Spotify added comments. So if you want to comment on this podcast, be sure to do it. They also added video to it, so you can now upload videos. So there's a lot of things changing. We are pushing into video a little bit more, which, for better or worse, that's just how it is. I mean, you just kind of have to roll with the punches or figure out how to do a better job with just your audio if you want to. So, I mean, where do you think, like, we're going with podcast PR or podcast in general? Are we going to see more podcasts, more niching going on? Because I mean, the future is still up in the air. It is growing. I mean, I've seen all the numbers. The numbers always say it's growing. It's not growing as fast as it was during the pandemic, but that's because we're back into the somewhat normal settings where people go out and have jobs. So where is the future going? Is it going to be more video centric podcasts and less about audio? Or is audio still going to play a really big role in it?
I think audio is still going to play a really big role. I think that not everybody's pivoting to video because no, who's sitting down and has time to watch? It's the same thing with television. Are you watching all of your shows or are you streaming them? There's a difference in all of that. So I think that audio is still going to be extremely relevant. It's not going anywhere. You will see more videos, and if you wanna watch the videos and watch the interview, then, that's great. Or maybe you wanna match the face to the voice, then you can go and look at even the episode art if you want to, or the video to see how that person interacts. But I think it's only going to grow more. I think that we will see more shows, we'll probably see more networks, and I think that it's a great opportunity for people who are not celebrities to have a platform to highlight their knowledge, to show that they can interview somebody else as a guest on a show. Uh, I think that we're going to see more and more of that. And so it's only going to elevate more. Podcasts they're not going to go anywhere. They will see more growth. We will see more sponsors. I think that people are understanding that it doesn't have to be a huge show, again, because of that specialization of you can reach exactly who you want to. And so people are going to sponsor that type of a thing versus, a Super Bowl ad for $1 million for 2 seconds. And you're reaching a lot of people, but are they your people? And podcasts allow you to reach your people. And so I think it's going to grow across the board with more shows. People are going to understand that you need to be a guest. So we'll see more guests, more pitches, for better or for worse. And we'll see more sponsors.
Gotcha. And people listening to this episode, and they're wondering, where can they find you online to learn more about what you do and podcast PR in general?
Thank you. My website is themlgcollective.com. You can find me on Instagram at Michelle Glogovac. You can also purchase my book anywhere you purchase books. How to Get on Podcasts is available. There's an audiobook. So if you love listening to me, you can listen to me read the book to you as well. And my show, My Simplified Life, is everywhere you listen to podcasts.
And any final thoughts for listeners?
Put yourself out there. I think that podcasts allow us to get to know people that we wouldn't otherwise hear from. And so that's why it's really important to be a guest, to, let people know that you are out there, you know what you're doing, to share your story. And so don't be afraid to put yourself out there as a guest and let hosts know that you appreciate what they do as well, because they're connecting you with people that you might never have heard of or have gotten to meet on the street or in the coffee shop unless they say nice shirt.
Fair enough. Well, thank you, Michelle, for joining Digital Coffee Marketing, Brewing, sharing your knowledge on podcast PR versus traditional PR.
Thank you so much for having me, Brett.
And thank you for listening. As always, please subscribe to this podcast on all your favorite podcasting apps. Leave a 5-star review. It really just help with the rankings. Let me know how I am doing. And join me next week as I talk to another great thought leader in the PR marketing industry. All right, guys, stay safe. Get to understanding podcasts and podcast PR if you have never heard it before. And see you next week. Later.